Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're diving straight into a really fascinating collection of thoughts and desires. These are ones you've shared with us, actually, all stemming from Nancy Friday's, well, groundbreaking book, Forbidden Flowers. More women's sexual fantasies. We're about to explore what these incredibly personal accounts reveal about, the inner landscape of female sexuality.
Exactly. And we've got this really rich array of firsthand experiences. It gives us a remarkable glimpse, doesn't it, into a realm that, well, as we know, has historically been kept pretty private, often misunderstood.
Right.
So our goal in this deep dive is to really unpack these excerpts. We want to draw the key insights into what these fantasies tell us about women's desires, maybe where they come from and why they matter.
Yeah, sort of give a shortcut to understanding this aspect of the female experience, which often seems, well, hidden.
Precisely. We want to offer a more profound understanding.
And this isn't just about, summarizing what's in the book, is it?
No, not at all.
We want to get to the heart of it. What do these fantasies tell us about the forces shaping women's desires, the societal expectations they deal with, and their journey toward a fuller sense of sexual freedom?
It's about understanding those deeper currents, yeah. And it's quite striking when you think about the initial resistance. I mean, the idea of even acknowledging female sexual fantasies.
Oh, definitely.
Back in 1973, as the book points out, you had Dr. Alan Fromm writing in Cosmopolitan that get this, women do not have sexual fantasies.
Wow. Seriously. What was the reasoning?
He attributed it to a supposed lack of ingrained sexual enjoyment in women, which is, well, a stark contrast to the later validation we saw from people like Dr. Kammer and Dr. Calderon.
Okay, let's unpack that initial dismissal a bit. It sounds like there was a real societal block, almost, when it came to accepting that women have these, inner erotic lives.
Precisely. A deep-rooted discomfort with the idea of women as active agents of their own sexuality, with their own internal worlds of desire.
And that discomfort led to skepticism
Yeah.
about the research.
Yeah, absolutely. Criticisms often focused on the self-selected sample, the idea that only certain women would share their fantasies.
So the argument was, these are just a few outliers, maybe not representative.
That was the implication, yeah. But despite that early resistance, the sheer volume of personal accounts started to shift things. And maybe more importantly, women just became more open about their experiences.
Right.
Dr. Calderon, reviewing Friday's earlier work, My Secret Garden, really emphasized the inherent value of these fantasies for the individual. She suggested they offer a kind of permission to fantasize.
Permission, right. And that could lead to a richer sex life.
Exactly. A more satisfying real-life sex life. It's almost the reverse of what Dr. Fromm was saying, isn't it?
It really is. If you're told you shouldn't have these thoughts or enjoy sex, well, you're probably less likely to even admit them to yourself.
You got it. And as one psychoanalyst observed, quote in the book, it is the unexamined corners of the mind that breed neurosis, and fear not the portions of ourselves we know, recognize, and accept.
That's powerful.
Bringing these fantasies into the light, like Nancy Friday did, was just a crucial step toward greater self-acceptance and sexual liberation for women.
Okay, let's move into the heart of these shared experiences then. What the early themes that really stands out is the influence of childhood, how that shapes these fantasies. What struck you there?
Well, what's really insightful is how those early societal the lack of open talk about sexuality can actually become a catalyst for a really vibrant fantasy life.
How so?
When young girls are told, don't think about such things, without any real explanation. It doesn't necessarily make the ideas go away. It often just pushes them into private thought.
Right, underground.
Yeah. And the book highlights this recurring pattern where guilt, maybe a strict upbringing, seems to correlate with the emergence of the most, daring and rebellious fantasies.
The classic forbidden fruit scenario, isn't it?
Yeah.
The more something's off limits, the more alluring it can become, even just in your head.
Precisely. There's a quote from Joyce in the book where she says something like, "What makes all my sexual activities so enjoyable is that my parents were so strict." It really brings this home.
So the silence, the potential guilt around these taboo ideas in childhood, they get revisited, elaborated on.
Exactly. And they take on an even greater erotic charge in the mind.
The book also distinguishes between different kinds of early fantasies, right? Some more imaginative, others more based on memory.
Yes, that's a really important distinction. Carla's letter, for instance. She describes fantasies that aren't so much about creating new scenarios, but more about vividly recalling past pleasurable experiences, reliving them.
Okay.
And the book suggests this type of fantasy, the one closer to actual past events, is often linked with lower levels of sexual anxiety and guilt.
That makes sense. So if your memories don't carry a lot of emotional baggage, maybe you feel more comfortable revisiting them sexually.
Exactly. But conversely, if past experiences are associated with discomfort or unresolved feelings, call it psychic pain, the fantasizer might be more inclined to create more elaborate fictional scenarios, maybe with imagined people.
Like creating a safer emotional distance.
Kinda, yeah. A safe distance from the original source of arousal. They might even visualize themselves in the third person in these fantasies.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift focus now to some of the recurring themes within the fantasies themselves. One that really jumped out was looking and being looked at voyeurism and exhibitionism. Roxanne's account really illustrated this, I think.
Yes, the looking theme. It's striking in Roxanne's 11 different fantasies. She clearly gets an erotic charge from both observing and being observed.
But there's a downside.
Well, as her letter poignantly concludes, this can be a source of tension, even anxiety, in heterosexual relationships. The underlying fear seems to be that male partners might misinterpret a woman's excitement at seeing something sexual.
Misinterpreted how?
They might see it not as a potential shared experience, but as like a reflection of their own inadequacy, or maybe a sign of an unmanageable sexuality.
That's a real shame, isn't it? Instead of seeing it as a way to explore together.
It's perceived as a problem, yeah. As one friend quoted in the book says, her ex-husband would rather believe she was frigid than confront the possibility that she just wasn't getting the kind of sexual experience she desired.
Wow. That really highlights a massive disconnect, doesn't it? In understanding, in communication.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Okay. Another really prominent theme was frustration. And it seems the book argues pretty clearly that this isn't always just about, a lack of physical intimacy.
That's a crucial insight, absolutely. While, sure, a lack of sexual activity can contribute to frustration, the book suggests that for many women, the frustration really stems from the quality of their sexual experiences.
Quality over quantity.
You could say that. There's this deep yearning for greater sexual richness, for desires and experiences that go beyond just the mechanics of sex.
And there's a double standard mentioned, too.
Right. The book touches on how male sexual frustration is often more readily accepted, maybe even excused, while a woman expressing similar feelings might face judgment or just misunderstanding.
So in that context, fantasies become a way to explore those unmet desires, to imagine a more fulfilling, more nuanced, erotic world.
Exactly. They aren't necessarily a sign of sexual deprivation, but more an expression of a desire for a more abundant and satisfying sexual life, as the book puts it beautifully.
So the fantasy itself is a form of sexual experience.
In a very real sense, yes.
The theme of power dynamics also crops up quite often. Fantasies involving dominance, submission, even scenarios of being forced. Sophie's spanking fantasy comes to mind.
Yeah, fantasies exploring power dynamics. They're often complex, easily misinterpreted. The book delves into these scenarios, dominant submissive roles, spanking, and yes, the sensitive area of rape fantasies.
And the interpretation there is key.
Yeah.
Right.
It's absolutely vital to understand that within the safe space of fantasy, these scenarios can represent a release of inhibited sexual energy, a way of exploring power where the fantasizer is totally in control.
So the force in the fantasy isn't about real violence.
No, not at all. The force and ardor of their rapist lover, as the book describes it, can allow women to tap into and release their own pent-up sexual intensity, but in a guilt-free, imagined way.
And the book is very clear about the distinction between fantasy and reality here, isn't it?
Absolutely crucial. It underscores that experiencing a certain emotion or scenario in a fantasy does not equate to wanting that in real life at all.
Like having an angry thought doesn't mean you'll act on it.
Exactly. These sexual fantasies provide a safe psychological space to explore complex emotions, complex desires, without any real-world implications. The book states it clearly.
Yeah.
There isn't a woman who wouldn't be terrified if she thought a rape fantasy might actually happen.
Right. Okay. Shifting gears a bit, the book also touches on incestuous fantasies. Lana's example with her cousin is mentioned.
Yes. Incestuous fantasies, while obviously carrying a huge social taboo, are acknowledged in the book as something some women do experience.
And Lana's example shows.
It illustrates that these fantasies can occur alongside a very clear understanding of real-world boundaries. There's no desire to act on those thoughts. The book just presents these fantasies without judgment, recognizing they exist within the wide spectrum of human sexual imagination.
Okay. Homosexual fantasies also feature quite prominently. June and Tina's experiences are examples. What were the key insights there?
Well, the discussion around homosexual fantasies really highlights the fluidity of sexual thought and maybe identity. Some women who fantasize about other women identify as lesbians, sure, but many others don't.
So the fantasy doesn't automatically define orientation.
Exactly. The book really emphasizes that the content of our fantasies doesn't necessarily dictate our sexual orientation or our desires in the real world. Jackie's experience is insightful here. Exploring her fantasies about women led her to greater self-acceptance, but it didn't necessarily change how she identified.
So it can be a positive internal exploration.
It can be, yes.
And then there's the undeniable allure of the unfamiliar. That comes through in fantasies about public figures, strangers, like Catherine's attraction to celebrities.
Yes, the appeal of the unfamiliar. That's a very common thread in these accounts. Fantasies about celebrities or strangers often tap into a sense of novelty, excitement, maybe freedom from the complexities of existing relationships.
Like Catherine's movie star fantasies.
Right. And the recurring theme of strangers in general, it really illustrates this desire for something different, something maybe unattainable in everyday life.
A mental escape almost, but still rooted in desire.
Precisely. And it can be a very powerful source of arousal because it exists outside the boundaries of the ordinary.
What about using fantasy during sex? With a partner. The book has examples of that too.
Indeed. There are accounts of women actively using fantasy to enhance their arousal, to reach orgasm during partnered sex.
Like the letter mentioning fantasizing about being a prostitute.
That's a compelling example, yes. It really demonstrates how the internal world of fantasy can enrich, even intensify, the physical experience with a partner. Adds another layer of excitement.
And some women take it further, actually acting out fantasies with partners.
Yeah.
What did those accounts reveal?
Those experiences, bringing fantasies to life, they really underscore the crucial role of trust and open communication, mutual enthusiasm in the relationship.
You get everyone on board.
Absolutely. The book shares examples, couples exploring scenarios like the husband who embraced his wife's tie-me-down fantasy or couples incorporating threesomes. These accounts highlight how honest talk and a willingness to experiment can lead to deeper intimacy, shared sexual fulfillment.
Sounds like it could be incredibly liberating if both partners are comfortable and excited.
Definitely. It's about creating a shared erotic landscape where both people feel safe and empowered to explore together.
Finally, the book briefly touches on some more unconventional fantasies, really showing the sheer breadth of desire.
Exactly. Those brief mentions fantasies like peeing on a partner or giantess fantasies, they just serve to underscore how vast and often surprising the spectrum of women's sexual imaginations can be.
Right.
It really drives home the point that in the realm of fantasy, there are pretty much no limits to what the mind can explore.
So after delving into all these shared experiences, what's the overall sense you get about how the understanding of female sexual fantasy has evolved, especially since My Secret Garden was published?
Well, the book strongly suggests that the act of sharing these fantasies and the increasing acceptance of them has led to a significant decrease in guilt, a much greater sense of freedom, even exuberance around female sexuality.
So bringing private thoughts into the open gave women a kind of permission.
Exactly. Permission to explore their desires without shame. This openness, fostered partly by Nancy Friday's earlier work, has led to a much deeper understanding of just how normal and how incredibly diverse female sexual fantasy really is.
It's like the more we talk about these things, bring them into the light, the less power any lingering stigma holds.
Precisely. And that liberation doesn't just affect individual self-acceptance. It opens the door for much more open, honest communication within relationships, too.
Okay, so to bring all this together then, what would you say are the key takeaways from our deep dive into Forbidden Flowers?
I think the main points are pretty clear. First, female sexual fantasies are incredibly common and remarkably diverse.
Normal and varied. Got it.
Second, their origins can often be traced back to early childhood experiences, societal messages we absorb. Third, they play a crucial role in exploring our desires, power dynamics, the whole spectrum of erotic possibilities inside us.
Exploring the inner landscape.
And maybe most importantly, they have the potential to significantly enhance both our individual and our partnered sexual experiences.
And the crucial distinction.
That fantasy is a deeply personal realm of exploration. It exists entirely separately from our real-life actions and identities.
A really important reminder. What goes on in our minds is just that ours. It doesn't necessarily define who we are or what we actually do.
Exactly. And that self-acceptance, combined with open communication,
Mhm.
that's really key to unlocking a more fulfilling, more authentic sexual life.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's maybe a final thought for everyone listening. How might openly acknowledging, perhaps even discussing our own fantasies, even the ones that feel a bit strange or unconventional, how might that further dismantle those lingering societal barriers? Could it lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves and maybe more authentic connections with our partners?
Hmm.
What might these shared excerpts illuminate about the hidden landscapes of desire and the ongoing evolution of sexual freedom? Definitely something worth reflecting on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.